Bang, bang, bang. Two men in uniforms burst through our front door at 7:30 a.m. Ma'am. Emergency HOA enforcement. You're coming with us. I watched in horror as they grabbed Emily's arms and started dragging her out. Get your hands off my wife, I screamed, but they overpowered me completely. Emily pressed something into my palm, cold metal, and whispered urgently before the door slammed shut. My wife was gone, standing there shaking. I looked down at what she'd given me. If you're dealing with suspicious authority figures, wherever you're reading this, pay attention. What I discovered changed everything. I was still in my pajamas when our world exploded. Emily had been up early as usual, standing in our kitchen with her coffee mug, watching the sun rise through our bay window. That's when they came. Two massive men in what looked like police uniforms. But something felt wrong from the moment I saw them through the peephole. Emergency Enforcement Division. The bigger one announced, flashing a badge so quickly I couldn't read it. We need to speak with Emily Carter immediately. His partner, equally imposing, stood silent behind him, hand resting on what appeared to be a radio, but made no sound. Both wore identical dark uniforms with patches that read community compliance officers, but the fabric looked cheap, like costume store material. What's this about? I asked. But Tom Harris, that's what his name tag said, was already pushing past me into our foyer. Sir, step aside. This is official HOA business regarding multiple severe violations documented at this address. His voice carried that false authority of someone trying too hard to sound official. Emily appeared at the top of our stairs, still holding her coffee. Gentlemen, I'll need to see proper identification and documentation before we proceed with anything. Her tone was perfectly calm, almost professional. Later, I'd understand why. Ma'am, you can cooperate now, or we'll have to escort you for questioning. Alex Turner finally spoke, his voice carrying a barely concealed threat. He pulled out a folder thick with papers. 15 violations recorded in the past week alone. Unauthorized lawn modifications, unapproved exterior paint, parking infractions, noise complaints from neighbors. I stared at him in disbelief. 15 violations? Emily maintains our property better than anyone in this neighborhood. This has to be some kind of mistake. But even as I spoke, something nagged at me. Our HOA had never mentioned enforcement officers before. We'd lived here 3 years, and violations were handled through mailed notices and board meetings. No mistake, sir, Tom said, stepping closer to Emily as she descended the stairs. Mrs. Carter, you're required to come with us for immediate processing. Failure to comply will result in escalated penalties and potential legal action. His hand moved to what looked like handcuffs on his belt. That's when Emily did something strange. Instead of protesting or asking more questions, she calmly walked to our kitchen counter and placed her coffee mug down. Of course, officers, I'll cooperate fully. She set the mug down, swept the room with a quick glance. Hinges, deadbolt, sight lines to the driveway, as if she were checking boxes I couldn't see. Emily, wait, I called out, grabbing my phone to start recording. You don't have to go anywhere until we verify this is legitimate. But Tom was already reaching for her arm. Sir, interference with official duties is a federal offense, he warned. But his eyes darted nervously toward my phone. Turn off that device immediately. Alex moved to block my view, but I kept filming around him. That's when the real struggle began. Tom grabbed Emily's left arm while Alex took her right, physically lifting her toward our front door. Ma'am, you can walk or be carried, but you're coming with us right now. Emily's feet barely touched the ground as they maneuvered her across our living room. But here's what struck me as impossibly weird. Emily wasn't fighting back the way any normal person would. She wasn't screaming or struggling wildly. Instead, she seemed to be assessing the situation, her eyes moving methodically around the room, noting exits and obstacles. When they hauled her past our entry table, she managed to slip something into my hand without the fake officers noticing. Her wedding ring. Why would she give me her wedding ring? Michael, listen carefully, she said, her voice steady despite being physically dragged. Record everything. Call the number listed under Thompson in my contacts. Tell them what happened. The way she spoke, it was like she was giving mission briefings, not desperately calling for help. What the hell do you think you're doing? I shouted at Tom and Alex, following them toward the door. You can't just kidnap someone over HOA violations. I kept my phone recording, catching every second of their faces, their fake badges, the license plate of their white van parked in our driveway. This is a lawful enforcement action, Alex grunted, struggling to maintain his grip on Emily as they crossed our threshold. Any further interference will result in charges against you as well. But sweat was beading on his forehead, and he kept glancing around our neighborhood nervously. Emily caught my eye one final time as they forced her toward their vehicle. Thompson knows everything. Call immediately. Then she was gone, the van door slamming shut behind her. Tom jumped into the driver's seat while Alex took shotgun, and they peeled out of our driveway like bank robbers fleeing a heist. I stood alone in my doorway, phone still recording, wedding ring clutched in my palm, trying to process what had just happened. My wife had been kidnapped by fake cops claiming to represent our HOA. But something about Emily's reaction bothered me almost as much as the kidnapping itself. She'd been too calm, too prepared, almost like she'd been expecting this. I rushed back inside and grabbed Emily's phone from the kitchen counter. Scrolling through her contacts, I found Thompson, listed with no other information except a phone number with a DC area code. Who was Thompson? Why did Emily have a Washington contact saved under such a generic name? And why had she specifically told me to call this person instead of 911? Standing in our violated home, looking at the coffee mug still warm on our counter, I realized I might not know my wife as well as I thought I did. The wedding ring felt heavy in my palm as I stared at that mysterious phone number. What kind of consulting work had Emily really been doing all these years? Federal Bureau of Investigation. Agent Thompson speaking. The voice was crisp, authoritative, and completely terrifying given the circumstances. This is Michael Carter. I manage my voice cracking. My wife, Emily, gave me your number. She told me to call Thompson if anything happened to her. The silence stretched so long, I wondered if the call had dropped. Mr. Carter, where's your wife now? Agent Thompson's tone became razor sharp. Tell me exactly what happened, starting from the beginning. I explained everything. The fake uniforms, HOA enforcement claims, the physical struggle, Emily's unnaturally calm behavior. Agent Thompson interrupted only to ask for the license plate number, which I read from my phone's recording. Sir, listen carefully, he said when I finished. Do not call local police. Do not post anything online. I'm dispatching agents immediately. Your wife is not who you think she is, and this situation involves federal crimes. The line went dead before I could ask what he meant. Not who I think she is. I've been married to Emily for 5 years, lived with her for 7. She worked in financial consulting, traveled occasionally for government contracts, maintained security clearance for boring compliance work. At least that's what I believed. I walked through our house with fresh eyes, searching for clues I'd somehow missed. In our bedroom closet, behind a false panel I'd never noticed, I discovered Emily's safe. It hung open as if she'd been preparing for something exactly like this. The contents made my blood freeze. A federal ID with Emily's photo, but reading Special Agent Emily Lynn Carter, Central Intelligence Agency. Classified files spread across the safe's interior showed financial records for shell companies, surveillance photographs of unknown men, and images of the same white van that had taken my wife parked outside different houses in various neighborhoods. My wife was a CIA agent. Every business trip, every vague explanation about her work, every deflected question about consulting clients, all lies. But as shock gave way to clarity, other details suddenly made sense. Emily's ability to spot people following us in crowds. Her insistence on back-to-wall seating in restaurants. The methodical way she checked locks each night, even in our safe neighborhood. Languages she claimed to have picked up in college. The sophisticated security system she'd installed, complete with cameras, I'd thought excessive. The woman I'd married was a spy, and her cover had been blown. Car doors slammed in our driveway. Through the window, I watched 4 people in dark suits emerge from 2 black SUVs, moving with the same measured precision I now recognized in Emily's behavior. The lead agent, a woman with steel gray hair, approached our door. "Mr. Carter, Agent Hayes, FBI. Agent Thompson sent us." She displayed credentials through the window. "We need to discuss your wife's situation immediately." "Is she really CIA?" I asked as they entered. "Special Agent Emily Carter is investigating a fraud network targeting government employees and their families," Agent Hayes confirmed, spreading photographs across her coffee table. The images showed surveillance shots of Tom and Alex, fake HOA credentials, and financial records linking them to a larger criminal organization. "We've been monitoring this case for months. What happened today means her cover is compromised." She was bait, I realized with growing horror, in a controlled operation. Yes, the plan was standard approach, attempted intimidation, then arrest at their processing location, but they deviated from expected patterns. Agent Hayes pulled up a tracking app on her tablet. "Your wife's wedding ring carries an emergency GPS transmitter and micro mic for situations like this. She's currently pinging from an abandoned warehouse in the industrial district. Her primary body wire dropped out 47 minutes ago." I stared at the blinking dot on her screen. Communication. "All undercover operatives have audio devices." Emily's went silent when they moved her. Agent Hayes studied my face. "Mr. Carter, your wife is in immediate danger. These criminals don't know they've kidnapped a federal agent, but when they discover it, everything changes." I thought about Emily's wedding ring still burning in my palm. Why did she give me this? Backup GPS transmitter integrated into a personal item. Standard protocol when the primary audio system cuts out. Agent Hayes stood decisively. "We're launching rescue operations now. Your wife made a specific request. If anything went wrong, you'd be given the choice to participate." The words hit like a physical impact. "What?" "She said you deserve to understand what she really does. It's highly irregular, but these are extraordinary circumstances." Agent Hayes gestured toward the tactical vehicles. "You'd stay in communication support, no direct danger, but you'd see how we operate." I looked around our living room, where we'd lived what I'd thought was an ordinary suburban life. Everything about my marriage had been built on lies. Yet Emily had risked everything to protect families like ours from these predators. "What happens if I come?" "You observe from the tactical vehicle with communications oversight. You'll understand how these missions work without exposure to risk." She paused meaningfully. "Mr. Carter, your wife lied about her profession, but everything else about your relationship is genuine. She's out there because she volunteered to stop people terrorizing government families." I remembered Emily's composed professionalism when Tom and Alex grabbed her. She'd known exactly what was happening and had prepared for this moment meticulously. My wife wasn't just a victim. She was the architect of the solution. The federal agents moved around our living room with military efficiency, coordinating communication channels and tactical approaches. Watching them work, I felt something unexpected rising in my chest, fierce pride. Emily belonged to this world of competence and courage. "Let's go get her," I said. Agent Hayes nodded approvingly. "Gear up. We roll in 8 minutes." Following them toward the vehicles, I realized our quiet suburban existence was finished forever. But watching these agents coordinate Emily's rescue with surgical precision, I understood something profound about the woman I'd married. She wasn't simply caught in this dangerous situation. She was the weapon designed to end it. The tactical vehicle's interior buzzed with radio chatter and digital displays showing Emily's location. As we pulled away from our house, I gripped her wedding ring tighter, understanding for the first time what kind of person I'd fallen in love with. Emily Carter wasn't just my wife. She was a federal agent who had volunteered to be kidnapped to protect other families from exactly what we'd experienced this morning. The lies about her job paled beside the truth about her character. Now we had to hope her training was enough to keep her alive until we reached her. The tactical vehicle felt like a mobile command center, its interior lined with monitors displaying real-time surveillance feeds, GPS coordinates, and communication channels. Agent Hayes handed me a headset as we sped through suburban streets toward the industrial district. "Your wife's signal is stationary at this location," she said, pointing to a blinking red dot on the central screen. "Abandoned textile warehouse, been empty for 2 years. Perfect isolation for their operation. The other agents worked silently around us, checking weapons and coordinating with additional units, converging on the target. What exactly is their operation? I asked, struggling to process everything that had happened in the past hour. Agent Hayes pulled up files on her tablet. Identity theft ring targeting government employees and their families. They use fake authority figures, HOA enforcement, building inspectors, utility workers, to gain access to homes and steal personal information. Your wife has been tracking them for 18 months. The radio crackled with updates from surveillance teams already in position. Alpha team in position, north side. No movement visible through windows. Thermal imaging shows 3 heat signatures, ground floor, southwest corner. 3 people, Emily and her 2 kidnappers. How long has she been undercover? I asked. Since the operation began. Emily volunteered after these criminals targeted several CIA families in Virginia. She moved to your neighborhood specifically because it fit their victim profile, affluent government employees, security conscious but not paranoid. Agent Hayes studied my expression. Mr. Carter, your marriage is real. The cover story was just her job description. The vehicle slowed as we approached a chain-link fence surrounding the warehouse complex. Through the windshield, I could see the white van that had taken Emily parked beside a loading dock. The building looked exactly like what you'd expect from a kidnapping operation. Isolated, multiple exits, no witnesses. Bravo team reports rear entrance secured, came another radio update. Charlie team moving to east side. No additional vehicles on premises. Agent Hayes spoke into her headset. Command, this is Hayes. Primary target confirmed. Beginning approach sequence. She turned to me. Mr. Carter, you'll monitor from here while we extract your wife. Communication feeds will let you hear everything as it happens. My hands shook as I adjusted the headset. Through the monitors, I watched tactical teams moving around the building like pieces on a chessboard. Each agent knew their role, precisely communicating through hand signals and minimal radio chatter. Alpha team eyes on targets through windows. 2 male subjects, 1 female subject seated in metal chair. Female appears alert and unrestrained. Emily was alive and apparently unharmed. Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by fresh anxiety about what would happen next. Mr. Carter, Agent Hayes said quietly, what you're about to witness is how federal law enforcement handles hostage situations. Your wife helped design this operation. She knew the risks. On the thermal imaging display, I could see 3 heat signatures clustered in one corner of the warehouse. Emily's kidnappers were holding her in exactly the kind of location law enforcement could assault safely. Isolated, multiple entry points, minimal collateral damage risk. All teams stand by for synchronized entry. Wait for go signal. The radio went silent except for steady breathing from various agents. Through the monitors, I watched them position themselves at different entrances, weapons ready, moving with deadly efficiency. This was Emily's world, calculated violence in service of justice. Alpha team leader, target identification confirmed. Tom Harris and Alex Turner both have outstanding federal warrants. Female hostage matches Agent Carter's description. And my wife was sitting in a chair surrounded by the same men who dragged her from our kitchen 3 hours ago. But according to the thermal imaging, she wasn't tied down. Why wasn't she trying to escape? Movement inside, reported Alpha team. Male subject approaching windows, appears agitated. Second male subject using mobile device. Agent Hayes leaned forward. Something's happening. They're getting nervous. Through the headset, I heard muffled voices from inside the warehouse. Someone was arguing, but I couldn't make out words. Then Agent Hayes' tablet chimed with an alert. News feeds just went live, she announced. Federal indictments unsealed for the entire network. If they're monitoring media, they'll see their names on federal warrant lists right about now. That explained the agitation. Tom and Alex had just discovered they were wanted by the FBI. All teams, targets are mobile inside building. Maintain positions, but prepare for acceleration. Suddenly, clearer audio bled into the net. Emily's voice, calm and steady. You boys should check the news. I think you'll find it interesting. Agent Hayes didn't look surprised. She tipped her chin toward a status light on the comms rack. Ring channels live. Command. Agent Carter is providing real-time intelligence. Prepare to exploit it. Through the audio feed, I heard Tom's voice. What the hell, boss? Our names are on federal indictments. How does she know about this? Because, Emily said with unmistakable satisfaction, I've been investigating you for 6 months. Federal investigator assigned to an FBI task force. The silence from inside the warehouse was deafening. Hayes on command net. All teams, the subject has identified as a federal investigator to the targets. Expect immediate escalation. Execute on my go. Everything happened simultaneously. Flashbang grenades exploded through multiple windows, filling the warehouse with blinding light and deafening noise. Tactical teams breached from 3 directions, shouting commands in coordinated sequence. Federal agents. Hands where we can see them. On the ground now. Nobody move. Through the chaos of radio chatter and tactical commands, I heard Emily's voice again, perfectly composed. The Alpha team leader moved in, voice steady over the net. Tom Harris, Alex Turner, hands where we can see them. You have the right to remain silent. She was reading them their Miranda rights while federal agents secured the scene. Suspects secured, came the all-clear signal. Agent Carter unharmed and mobile. Building cleared. I watched through the monitors as Emily walked out of the warehouse under her own power, flanked by tactical agents, but clearly in control of the situation. She moved with the same confidence I'd seen that morning when Tom and Alex had tried to intimidate her. My wife hadn't been a victim at all. She'd been running the operation from the moment they grabbed her. Agent Hayes removed her headset and looked at me seriously. Mr. Carter, what you just witnessed was 18 months of federal investigation reaching its conclusion. Your wife wasn't kidnapped. She was completing her mission. As tactical teams escorted Tom and Alex toward federal transport vehicles, I realized the scope of what Emily had accomplished. She'd allowed herself to be taken by dangerous criminals, maintained her cover until the perfect moment, then revealed her identity precisely when backup arrived to arrest them. She planned this whole thing, I said, understanding flooding through me. Every detail. The only variable was timing. We couldn't predict exactly when they'd make their move, but when they did, your wife was ready. As Emily appeared in the tactical vehicle's doorway, still wearing the same clothes from our kitchen that morning, but now carrying herself with unmistakable federal authority. Hi, honey, she said, smiling at my shocked expression. Sorry I'm late for dinner. We need to talk, Emily said as she settled into the tactical vehicle beside me. Her voice carried the same warm tone I'd heard every morning for 5 years, but her eyes told a different story, focused, a little bloodshot, tracking every radio call. She adjusted her headset by feel, kept her shoulders square, and without rushing a word, walked me through how she'd steered a room full of felons into a controlled endgame. Are you hurt? I asked, studying her face for signs of trauma or injury. They never laid a hand on me, she replied, squeezing my shoulder reassuringly. Michael, I know this is overwhelming. I want to tell you the truth so many times, but operational security required complete compartmentalization. Agent Hayes interrupted from the front seat. Agent Carter, we need your debrief on the warehouse interrogation. What did Harris and Turner reveal about their operation? Emily shifted seamlessly into professional mode. They're middle management at best. Tom mentioned a boss multiple times, someone who's been coordinating targets and providing intelligence about government employees. Alex let slip that they've been operating in Virginia, Texas, and Colorado using the same HOA enforcement cover. Through the vehicle's monitors, I watched federal agents processing the crime scene. Tom and Alex sat in separate transport vehicles, heads down, the fight completely gone out of them. Less than 4 hours ago, these men had invaded our home and physically dragged my wife away. Now, they looked like defeated children waiting for their parents to pick them up from school. What happened inside the warehouse? I asked Emily. The thermal imaging showed you weren't restrained. Emily's expression sharpened. They weren't trained interrogators. Tom paced, and asked the same questions about my government connections while Alex sweated and kept checking his phone. I held cover as long as it served us. But when his alerts popped with the federal indictments, timing flipped. I brought the Ring channel live to stack pressure and synchronize the breach with the arrests we needed. The radio crackled with updates from the warehouse. "Command, this is Alpha Team Leader. We've recovered computers, financial records, and communication devices. Initial review shows connections to at least 47 similar incidents across 8 states. 47 families terrorized by these criminals. 47 households violated the same way ours had been this morning. Emily had volunteered to be kidnapped to stop this pattern of victimization." Agent Carter, Agent Hayes continued, "We need your assessment of the psychological profiles. How did Harris and Turner react when you revealed your federal status?" Emily's expression became analytically detached. Tom stumbled backward and dropped his fake badge. Alex started to hyperventilate, mumbling about working something out. No contingency, no plan, just panic the second real federal power walked in. That's the fault line between theater and authority. What matters now isn't their performance. It's the paperwork, the victims, and the follow-through. Through the monitors, I could see crime scene technicians photographing evidence inside the warehouse. The same building where Emily had been held captive was now yielding investigative intelligence that would dismantle an entire criminal network. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked. The undercover assignment started when these criminals targeted CIA families in Northern Virginia. 3 separate incidents, all using fake authority figures to gain access to classified employees' homes. Emily reached over and took my hand. "When I volunteered for this operation, I knew it meant lying to you about my work, but I also knew it was the only way to protect other families from what we experience today." Agent Hayes' tablet chimed with incoming intelligence. "Additional arrests are happening simultaneously in Virginia, Texas, and Colorado. Your warehouse intelligence helped coordinate raids in multiple states. We're looking at RICO charges for the entire network." "RICO?" I asked. "Racketeering," Emily explained. "When criminal organizations operate across state lines using systematic fraud, federal prosecutors can charge everyone involved as part of a criminal enterprise." Tom and Alex aren't just facing kidnapping charges. They're facing decades in federal prison. The tactical vehicle began moving back toward our neighborhood. Through the windows, I watched the warehouse complex disappear behind us, but I knew our suburban life was disappearing with it. Everything I believed about my marriage had been fundamentally altered in the space of a few hours. "Emily, how do we move forward from this?" I asked. "How do I trust someone who's been lying to me for 18 months? She was quiet for a long moment, looking out at the familiar streets we'd driven together hundreds of times. "I've been lying about my job, Michael. But everything else, our relationship, our home, our future together, that's all real. The woman you married isn't a cover identity. She's just someone who happens to work in national security." Agent Hayes glanced back at us. "Mr. Carter, if it helps, your wife's operation will save countless families from the trauma you experience today. Federal agents rarely get the chance to prevent crimes before they happen, but that's exactly what Agent Carter accomplished." As we pulled into our driveway, I saw our house with completely different eyes. The security system Emily had insisted on installing. The methodical way she checked locks each night. Her insistence on always knowing our neighbors and their schedules. None of it had been paranoia. It had been professional vigilance. "What happens now?" I asked as federal agents began setting up a mobile command post in our garage. "Debriefing, paperwork, preparation for trials," Emily replied. "Tom and Alex will cooperate to reduce their sentences, which means we'll learn about every family they've targeted and every crime they've committed. This investigation will continue for months." "And us?" Emily took both my hands and looked directly into my eyes. "I'm requesting reassignment to non-undercover work. No more lies. No more cover stories. No more operations that required deceiving my husband." She paused. "If you'll have me." Sitting in our driveway, surrounded by federal agents and tactical vehicles, I realized that Emily's lies had been in service of something larger than herself. She'd risked her life and our marriage to protect innocent families from dangerous criminals. I need time to process all of this, I said honestly. I know, and I'll answer every question you have as many times as you need to ask them. Emily squeezed my hands. Michael, I'm the same person you married. I just have a more complicated job than you realized. As federal agents continued coordinating the aftermath of her operation, I understood that my wife wasn't just a government employee. She was someone willing to sacrifice her personal safety for other people's protection. The woman I'd fallen in love with was exactly who I'd thought she was. I just never understood how extraordinary that actually made her. 3 days later, our dining room had been transformed into a federal evidence processing center. Agent Hayes and her team had converted our home into a temporary command post with Emily's cooperation to analyze the intelligence recovered from the warehouse. I'd taken emergency leave from work to process everything that had happened. But mostly, I found myself watching my wife operate in her natural element. Michael, come look at this, Emily called from behind a wall of monitors and document stacks. She was sitting at our dining table, now covered with surveillance photographs, financial records, and computer printouts. The woman I'd eaten breakfast with for 5 years was dissecting a criminal enterprise with surgical precision. We've identified the full scope of William Foster's operation, she explained, pointing to an organizational chart displayed on one of the laptops. He's been running this fraud network for 3 years, targeting government employees across 8 states. Tom and Alex were just street-level operatives. Agent Hayes joined us at the table. The warehouse computers contained everything: victim databases, operational protocols, financial records, and, critically, timestamps that lined up with the ring transmitter pings from the morning of the grab. Foster built a sophisticated criminal enterprise that specifically exploited people's trust in authority figures. I studied the evidence spread across our table. Photographs showed dozens of families being intimidated by people in fake uniforms. HOA enforcement, building inspectors, utility workers, even fake FBI agents. The scope was breathtaking and terrifying. How many families were victimized? I asked. Confirmed 47 households across Virginia, Maryland, Texas, Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, California, and Florida, Emily replied. But we suspect the actual number is much higher. Many victims never reported these incidents because they thought they were legitimate authority contacts. She pulled up financial records on her laptop. Foster's organization stole over $2.3 million through identity theft, fraudulent fines, and extortion schemes. They were particularly effective because they researched their targets thoroughly before making contact. Agent Hayes added, "Your wife's undercover work provided the intelligence breakthrough we needed." Emily identified the psychological profiles they used to select victims and the operational patterns that connected seemingly random crimes across multiple jurisdictions. I looked at Emily with new understanding. "You've been building this case for 18 months, since the first CIA family was targeted in Alexandria. I volunteered for the assignment because these criminals were exploiting the same community trust that makes neighborhoods safe." Emily's voice carried quiet intensity. They turned people's faith in legitimate authority into a weapon against innocent families. The evidence was overwhelming. Tom and Alex had kept detailed records of every family they had approached, including photographs of homes, license plates, work schedules, and family members. Their targeting wasn't random. It was systematic stalking of government employees and their families. This photograph was taken outside our house 6 weeks ago. Emily showed me a surveillance image of our driveway. They'd been watching us for over a month, learning our routines, confirming my security clearance status through public record searches. The violation felt personal and complete. These criminals hadn't just invaded our home this morning. They'd been systematically studying our private lives for weeks. Agent Carter, Agent Hayes said, "Walk us through how they selected targets." Emily shifted into analytical mode. Primary criteria was government employment with security clearances. They used publicly available databases to identify federal employees, then cross-referenced addresses with upscale neighborhoods. Secondary factors included property values, vehicle registrations, and social media presence indicating disposable income. She pulled up a detailed targeting profile with our names and personal information. Michael and Emily Carter, CIA analyst with financial access. Household income estimated at $120,000 annually. Property value $450,000. 2 late model vehicles. Active social media showing vacation travel and home improvement projects. Seeing our lives reduced to criminal targeting data was chilling. We weren't people to Foster's organization. We were assets to be exploited. How did they know so much about us? I asked. Information brokers, Agent Hayes explained. Foster purchased personal data from legitimate companies that collect consumer information. Credit reporting agencies, marketing firms, background check services, all completely legal sources that criminals can exploit for illegal purposes. Emily continued. Once they identified targets, they spent weeks developing approach strategies. The HOA enforcement angle was brilliant because it exploited people's existing relationships with community organizations. Most victims initially trusted them because the claim seemed plausible. I thought about our neighbors who'd mentioned similar visits. Mrs. Jenkins said they came to her house, too. Foster's team approached 12 families in our neighborhood over the past 2 months, Emily confirmed. Most residents didn't answer their doors or demanded additional verification, so they moved on to easier targets. We were selected because my security clearance made us high-value assets worth the extra effort. The scope of surveillance and planning was staggering. These weren't opportunistic criminals. They were sophisticated predators who'd turned home invasion into a systematic business model. Agent Hayes, what's happening with the arrests in other states? I asked. 23 individuals in custody so far. Foster himself was arrested in Nevada yesterday when he tried to board a flight to Mexico. His financial records show offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands and Switzerland containing nearly $4 million in stolen assets. Emily pulled up photographs of Foster's arrest. He looked like an ordinary businessman in his 50s, not the criminal mastermind who'd terrorized dozens of families. The beauty of this operation was its mundane appearance. Foster recruited ex-military and former security personnel who could project authority convincingly. To victims, they looked exactly like legitimate enforcement officers. What happens to the stolen money? I asked. Asset forfeiture and victim restitution, Agent Hayes replied. Federal prosecutors will recover everything possible and distribute it to families who suffered financial losses. It won't repair the psychological trauma, but it provides some measure of justice. I looked around our dining room, now filled with evidence of crimes against families just like ours. Emily had lived with this knowledge for 18 months, knowing that our neighbors and friends were potential targets, unable to warn anyone without compromising her investigation. Emily, how did you handle the stress of knowing all this while maintaining your cover? She was quiet for a moment. The hardest part was watching you worry about home security and neighborhood safety, knowing I couldn't explain why your concerns were completely justified. Every time you mentioned feeling like someone was watching our house, I wanted to tell you that someone actually was. The weight of her isolation hit me fully. Emily had been protecting not just federal investigations, but our personal safety while pretending to be someone she wasn't. The lies hadn't been betrayals. They had been sacrifices. Agent Carter, Agent Hayes said, your testimony will be crucial for prosecuting the entire network. Foster's operation constituted a criminal enterprise under RICO statutes, which means everyone involved faces enhanced federal sentences. Emily nodded. Tom and Alex are already cooperating. They've provided detailed information about operational procedures, target selection criteria, and financial distributions. Their testimony will help convict the entire organization. As I watched my wife systematically dismantle a criminal network that had terrorized dozens of families, I realized the scope of what she'd accomplished. Emily hadn't just solved the case. She prevented countless future victims from experiencing what we'd endured. Our quiet suburban life was permanently changed. But Emily's courage had made other families safer. 2 weeks after Emily's rescue, our neighborhood community center was packed beyond capacity. Word had spread about the federal investigation, and residents demanded answers about the criminals who'd been stalking their families. Emily and I sat in the front row, watching Agent Hayes prepare to address nearly 300 concerned neighbors. "Michael, are you ready for this?" Emily asked quietly. We'd agreed that tonight would be the first time our community learned the truth about her work and the danger they had all been facing. "Are you?" I replied. For 18 months, Emily had lived among these people while secretly investigating the criminals targeting them. Tonight, she'd have to explain both her deception and her protection. Agent Hayes approached the podium with the same commanding presence she displayed during the warehouse operation. Behind her, a large screen showed photographs of Tom Harris, Alex Turner, and William Foster along with evidence recovered from their criminal enterprise. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming tonight. I'm Agent Hayes, Federal Bureau of Investigation. I'm here to discuss a criminal investigation that directly impacted your community and to recognize someone who risked everything to protect your families." A murmur went through the crowd. Our neighbors had lived through weeks of uncertainty, knowing that federal agents had arrested people in their neighborhood, but receiving no official explanation. Over the past 3 years, a criminal organization led by William Foster systematically targeted government employees and their families using fake authority figures. This neighborhood was specifically selected because of its demographics and the presence of federal employees. Media access tonight is restricted. Identities and sensitive methods remain redacted for everyone's safety. Agent Hayes activated the first slide showing surveillance photographs taken around our neighborhood. These criminals spent months studying your daily routines, identifying targets, and planning intimidation campaigns designed to steal personal information and financial assets. I watched our neighbors' faces as they recognized their own homes in the surveillance photos. Mrs. Jenkins covered her mouth in shock when she saw images of the fake enforcement officers outside her house. Mr. Roberts from across the street shook his head in disgust at photos showing Tom and Alex studying his driveway. The investigation that led to their arrest was an 18-month federal operation requiring extraordinary personal sacrifice from someone in this room tonight. Agent Hayes looked directly at Emily. "I'd like to ask investigator Emily Carter from the Federal Task Force to explain how this case was developed and resolved." Emily stood and walked to the podium with quiet confidence. The room fell completely silent as our neighbors realized that the woman they'd known as a friendly consultant was actually a federal agent. "My name is Emily Carter, and I'm assigned to a federal task force focused on authority impersonation crimes. 18 months ago, I volunteered for an undercover assignment that required me to move to this neighborhood and live among you while investigating the criminals who were targeting your families." The silence stretched as 300 people processed this revelation. Then Mrs. Jenkins stood up. "Emily, were you protecting us this whole time?" "Yes, ma'am. Every day for 18 months, I was gathering intelligence about criminals who viewed your families as potential victims. I couldn't warn anyone without compromising the investigation, but I was working to keep you safe." Mr. Roberts raised his hand. "The morning those fake cops came to your house, that was part of your investigation?" "It was the culmination of my investigation. I allowed myself to be taken by those criminals so federal agents could arrest them and gather evidence of their entire operation." Emily's voice carried steady authority. "What happened to my family that morning has happened to 47 other families across 8 states." Agent Hayes returned to the podium. Investigator Carter's operation produced 23 arrests and more than $2 million in recoveries. As documented, 47 households across 8 states were victimized, and the case is being prosecuted under RICO. More importantly, those outcomes stopped the next wave before it started. William Foster's crew chose neighborhoods like this: federal employees, higher property values, strong community trust, and then weaponized that trust. A woman in the middle section stood up. "How do we know this won't happen again?" Emily answered. "The entire network has been dismantled. Federal prosecutors are pursuing RICO charges, which means everyone involved faces decades in prison. Additionally, We shared our investigative techniques with law enforcement agencies nationwide to prevent similar operations. Agent Hayes added, "We're also implementing new verification protocols for any authority figures who approach residents. Every legitimate federal agency now provides verification hotlines that citizens can call to confirm the identity of anyone claiming official status." The questions continued for over an hour. Neighbors wanted to understand how the targeting worked, what personal information had been compromised, and what security measures they should implement. Emily answered each question with patient professionalism, but I could see the emotional toll of maintaining her cover story for so long. Agent Carter called out a man from the back row. "Why did you volunteer for such a dangerous assignment?" Emily was quiet for a moment. "Because criminals were terrorizing families just like mine. When I learned that CIA families in Virginia had been victimized by these same people, I knew I had the skills to stop them. Someone had to be willing to become a target to protect everyone else." The room erupted in spontaneous applause. Our neighbors, people who'd shared barbecues and birthday parties with us, were recognizing Emily's sacrifice and courage. Mrs. Jenkins started the standing ovation, followed by Mr. Roberts, then the entire room. I watched my wife accept the recognition she deserved, understanding fully for the first time what kind of person I'd married. Emily hadn't just been doing her job. She'd been laying her life on the line every day to protect people she'd grown to care about. Agent Hayes concluded the presentation with practical information about victim services, federal compensation programs, and ongoing security recommendations. But the real message of the evening was clear. Emily Carter had voluntarily placed herself in danger to keep everyone else safe. As the crowd began dispersing, neighbors approached Emily individually to thank her. Mrs. Jenkins hugged her tightly. "Honey, I always knew there was something special about you. I just never imagined it was this." Mr. Roberts shook her hand firmly. "Emily, my family owes you a debt we can never repay." Walking home together through our familiar neighborhood, I felt the weight of the past 3 weeks settling into a new understanding. Our quiet suburban life was permanently changed, but had been built on a foundation of Emily's courage that I'd never recognized. "How do you feel about everyone knowing the truth?" I asked as we reached her front door. Relieved, Emily smiled, looking genuinely relaxed for the first time since I'd known her. I never realized how exhausting it was to lie to people I cared about. She unlocked our door with the same key she'd carried for years, but everything about our relationship had been transformed by honesty. "Michael, I meant what I said about requesting non-undercover assignments. No more lies, no more cover stories." Standing in our doorway, looking at the same home where our ordeal had begun 3 weeks ago, I realized that Emily's lies had been in service of a truth larger than our marriage. She'd sacrificed personal honesty to achieve professional integrity. Our neighbors were safe because my wife had been willing to live a lie in order to serve a greater truth. 6 months later, I sat in the federal courthouse gallery watching my wife testify against the criminals who'd invaded our home. Emily wore a dark suit and spoke with the same composed authority she displayed during the community meeting. But today, her words would determine whether Tom Harris, Alex Turner, and William Foster spent the next decades in federal prison. "Agent Carter," the federal prosecutor began, "please describe for the jury how you became involved in this investigation." Emily looked directly at the 12 jurors as she spoke. "In March of last year, 3 CIA families in Northern Virginia were victimized by individuals claiming to represent various authority organizations. The pattern of targeting suggested a sophisticated criminal enterprise specifically exploiting government employees and their families. From my seat behind the prosecution table, I could see Tom and Alex at the defense table. The same men who'd physically dragged my wife from our kitchen now sat in orange jumpsuits, their previous arrogance completely absent. They looked smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of federal charges and overwhelming evidence. "Did you volunteer for this undercover assignment?" The prosecutor continued. "Yes. My background in financial crimes investigation and my security clearance made me an ideal target profile for this criminal organization. I requested permission to relocate and assume the role they were seeking. A government employee with valuable personal information living in an affluent neighborhood. The prosecutor activated a large screen showing the organizational chart Agent Hayes had first displayed in our dining room. Agent Carter, please explain the scope of the criminal enterprise you investigated. Emily stood and approached the evidence display. William Foster's organization operated across 8 states using systematic identity theft and extortion schemes. They employed former security personnel to impersonate legitimate authority figures, researched government employees through publicly available databases, and exploited community trust to gain access to private homes and personal information. I watched the jury's faces as Emily methodically explained how the criminals had turned neighborhood safety into a weapon against innocent families. Several jurors took detailed notes when she described the targeting criteria and surveillance techniques. How many families were victimized? 47 confirmed incidents across the same 8 states previously documented, with losses exceeding $2.3 million. The psychological harm can't be quantified. The defense attorney cross-examined Emily for nearly 2 hours, attempting to characterize the operation as entrapment or excessive federal overreach. But Emily's responses were precise and unshakable. She'd lived this investigation for 18 months and knew every detail of the evidence. Agent Carter, isn't it true that you deliberately made yourself a target to lure my clients into committing crimes they wouldn't have otherwise committed? No, sir. Your clients had already committed 46 similar crimes before approaching my family. I simply provided them with an opportunity to commit their 47th crime in circumstances where federal agents could arrest them and recover evidence of their entire operation. The prosecutor's closing argument was devastating. He played video footage recovered from the warehouse showing Tom and Alex discussing previous victims, including elderly residents they'd intimidated and families they'd terrorized. The jury watched in obvious disgust as the criminals laughed about easy marks and stupid suburban people who trust anyone in a uniform. William Foster's trial had concluded the previous month with a guilty verdict on all counts. As the mastermind of the enterprise, he'd received 35 years in federal prison and been ordered to pay $4.8 million in restitution to victims. His offshore accounts had been seized, and his assets were being distributed to the families his organization had harmed. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all charges against Tom and Alex. The judge scheduled sentencing for the following week, but federal guidelines suggested they'd receive between 12 and 15 years each. Standing outside the courthouse with Emily after the verdicts were announced, I felt a sense of completion that had been building for months. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been earned through Emily's courage and the professional competence of federal law enforcement. How do you feel? I asked as we walked toward our car. Satisfied, Emily replied. Every family those criminals terrorized will know that their suffering led to justice. That matters more than personal vindication. Agent Hayes joined us on the courthouse steps. Agent Carter, I wanted you to know that your case study is being used to train federal agents nationwide. The techniques you developed for infiltrating fraud networks targeting government employees are now standard protocol. What about the other victims? I asked. Victim Services has provided counseling and financial compensation to all 47 families. Many have testified that knowing their experiences helped catch these criminals has provided significant psychological healing. Agent Hayes paused. Your wife's operation didn't just solve a case. It prevented hundreds of future victims. 3 weeks later, we attended Tom and Alex's sentencing hearing. Both men had cooperated extensively with federal prosecutors, providing testimony that led to additional arrests and asset recovery. In exchange for their cooperation, they received sentences at the lower end of federal guidelines, 12 years for Tom, 10 years for Alex. Before imposing sentence, Judge Patterson addressed both defendants directly. Mr. Harris and Mr. Turner, you exploited the fundamental trust that makes communities safe. You turned people's faith in legitimate authority into a weapon against innocent families. The sentences I'm imposing today reflect not just your individual crimes, but your participation in a criminal enterprise that terrorized dozens of families across multiple states. Tom and Alex stood silently as they were sentenced. The arrogance and false authority they had displayed in our kitchen 6 months ago had been completely broken by federal prosecution and the certainty of spending the next decade in prison. Walking out of the courthouse for the final time, Emily and I stopped to speak with other victim families who'd attended the sentencing. Mrs. Jenkins from Northern Virginia hugged Emily tightly. Agent Carter, knowing that our nightmare helped catch these people has made all the difference in my recovery. Similar conversations occurred with families from Texas, Colorado, and Arizona who traveled to witness justice being served. Each family expressed gratitude that their trauma had contributed to stopping the criminals and preventing future victimizations. Agent Carter called a reporter from the local newspaper. "What's next for you professionally?" Emily smiled. "I'm detailed as an instructor to the FBI's training program on financial fraud networks targeting government employees. No more undercover work, just using what I learned to help other agents protect families like mine." As we drove home through the same neighborhood where our ordeal had begun, I reflected on how completely our lives had changed. The quiet suburban existence we'd thought we were living had actually been built on Emily's daily courage and professional sacrifice. "Any regrets?" I asked as we pulled into our driveway. Emily considered the question seriously. "About lying to you for 18 months? Yes. About volunteering for an assignment that kept 47 families safer? Never. Our house looked exactly the same as it had the morning Tom and Alex had invaded our kitchen. But everything about our understanding of safety, authority, and community had been transformed by the experience of fighting back against criminals who had exploited those very concepts. Justice had been served, but more importantly, other families would be protected because Emily had been willing to sacrifice personal honesty for professional integrity. 1 year later, I stood in the same kitchen where our ordeal had begun, watching Emily prepare coffee with the same methodical precision she'd always displayed. But this morning was different. Today marked the first anniversary of the day fake HOA cops had tried to drag my wife out of our home, only to discover they'd kidnapped a federal agent whose backup was already on the way. "Ready for today's presentation?" I asked, adjusting my tie. We were speaking at a law enforcement conference in Washington about citizen protection from authority impersonation schemes. "Always," Emily replied, but her smile carried a warmth that had been absent during her undercover years. "It's strange how much easier it is to talk about this work when I don't have to lie about who I am." Through our kitchen window, I could see Mrs. Jenkins tending her garden. She waved when she noticed me watching, the same friendly gesture she'd made every morning for 2 years. But now we all understood what safety actually looked like. Not the absence of danger, but the presence of people willing to stand against it. Our neighborhood had become something of a model community for federal protection protocols. The verification systems Emily had helped design were now standard practice in government employee neighborhoods nationwide. Simple procedures that allowed residents to confirm the legitimacy of anyone claiming official authority. "Michael, look at this," Emily said, showing me an email on her tablet. "The training program we developed has been implemented in 43 states. Local law enforcement agencies are reporting significant decreases in authority impersonation crimes." I read over her shoulder as she scrolled through success stories. Police departments in Texas, Colorado, and Arizona had prevented multiple fraud attempts using the verification techniques Emily had pioneered. Families were safer because my wife had been willing to be kidnapped by criminals. "Any word from Agent Hayes about the congressional testimony?" I asked. "Next month. They want me to present our case study to the House Judiciary Committee as part of new federal legislation on authority impersonation crimes." Emily paused her coffee preparation. "The HOA Transparency Act they're proposing would require federal registration for any organization claiming enforcement authority over residential communities." The ripple effects of Emily's operation continued, expanding far beyond our original case. Federal legislation inspired by her investigation would protect millions of families from the kind of systematic targeting we'd experienced. My phone buzzed with a text from Agent Hayes. Watching the morning news? Channel 7 is featuring your anniversary story. We turned on the television to find a reporter standing outside our neighborhood discussing the federal operation that had dismantled William Foster's criminal network. The story included interviews with victim families from multiple states, all expressing gratitude that their trauma had contributed to protecting other communities. While names of investigators and sensitive tactics were withheld, 1 year ago, federal agents arrested 23 individuals in a coordinated operation across 8 states, the reporter explained. The investigation centered on this suburban neighborhood where a federal investigator assigned to an FBI task force had spent 18 months undercover infiltrating a criminal organization that targeted government employees and their families. The news segment included brief interviews with our neighbors, all praising Emily's sacrifice and the ongoing security improvements in our community. Mrs. Jenkins appeared on camera saying, "Emily Carter is a hero who risked everything to keep our family safe." How does it feel to be famous? I asked Emily as we watched our story on national television. Complicated, she replied honestly. I'm proud of what we accomplished, but I never wanted personal recognition. The real victory is families who will never experience what we went through because systems are in place to protect them. We drove to the conference in Emily's government vehicle, equipped with communication systems that let her coordinate with partner agencies nationwide. Her transition from undercover work to interagency training had been seamless, using her expertise while finally letting her live openly. "Emily," I said as we reached the highway, "do you miss the undercover work?" She considered the question carefully. "I miss the intensity and the direct impact on criminal investigations, but I don't miss lying to people I care about, including you. What we're doing now, training other agents, developing protection protocols, educating communities, feels more sustainable." The conference center was packed with law enforcement professionals from across the country, all attending sessions on authority impersonation crimes and federal protection strategies. Emily's presentation was the keynote address, highlighting both the criminal techniques they discovered and the investigative methods that had exposed them. Standing at the podium before 300 federal agents, local police officers, and community safety coordinators, Emily commanded the room with quiet authority. "Ladies and gentlemen, authority impersonation crimes succeed because they exploit our fundamental trust in legitimate law enforcement. Today, I'll show you how to protect that trust while making communities safer." Her presentation included video evidence from the warehouse operation, demonstrating how criminals psychologically manipulated victims and how federal agents had systematically dismantled their network. The footage of Tom and Alex's complete psychological breakdown when they realized they'd kidnapped a federal agent drew audible gasps from the audience. The moment fake authority encounters real federal power, criminal confidence collapses immediately, Emily explained as the video showed Tom dropping his fake badge and Alex hyperventilating. That freeze response is why citizen verification protocols are so effective. Criminals cannot maintain their performance when challenged by informed citizens who know how to confirm legitimate authority. During the question and answer period, law enforcement professionals from around the country shared their own experiences with similar crimes and discussed implementation strategies for the protection protocols Emily had developed. Agent Carter asked a police chief from Colorado, "What advice do you have for families who suspect they're being targeted?" "Trust your instincts, verify everything, and remember that legitimate authority figures welcome verification requests. Real federal agents want citizens to confirm their identity. Criminals will pressure you to comply immediately without verification." After the conference, we drove home through the same suburban streets where Emily had once lived undercover, pretending to be someone she wasn't, while protecting people she'd grown to care about. Now she could wave to neighbors honestly, attend community meetings openly, and discuss her work without deception. "Michael," Emily said as we pulled into our driveway, "I know this year has been difficult. Learning that your wife had been lying to you, watching federal trials, adjusting to all the changes. Do you have any regrets?" I looked at our house, the same building where armed criminals had invaded our kitchen, where federal agents had later set up command centers, where we'd rebuilt our marriage on a foundation of complete honesty. About marrying someone brave enough to volunteer for undercover assignments that protect innocent families? Never. I squeeze her hand. About learning that my wife is even more extraordinary than I'd realized? That's not a regret. That's the best surprise of my life. Emily smiled and unlocked our front door with the same key she'd carried throughout her undercover assignment. But everything about our life together had been transformed by truth. As we entered our kitchen, I realized that the quiet suburban existence we'd thought we were living had actually been built on Emily's daily courage. Now we could live that life authentically, with the knowledge that our safety had been earned through her willingness to sacrifice personal comfort for community protection. The morning coffee tasted the same as it had a year ago, but we were drinking it as people who had faced criminal predators and emerged stronger together, and completely honest with each other for the first time. What do you think about this story? Share your thoughts in the comments below, especially on themes of violence and injustice in everyday life. Do you believe ordinary people should take more steps to verify authority? Or is the system at fault? Take a stand and let us know your perspective.